Okay, we're recording. Okay. Turning the other cheek. What does that mean? So this is found in Matthew chapter 5, verses 38 through 42. It's the Sermon on the Mount. Keep in mind that there are a lot of people there. Diversification, entrepreneurs, slaves, servants, Romans, sure there were Roman guards. They're like the police force, and they hang out. We know that there were Roman guards with John the Baptist, who actually got baptized and said, "What must we do?" So they must have either already been proselytes to Judaism, or with that became proselytes to Judaism. A proselyte versus a convert to Judaism is somebody who went as far as, but not including circumcision. Okay, like the centurion Cornelius, who Peter went to his house and baptized in the Holy Spirit and all that stuff in the book of Acts. Okay, so the subject of this is about vengeance. Jesus starts off with saying, "You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth." I like to correlate this with Romans chapter 12, where Paul talks about, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. Why is that? We can't handle vengeance in our impurity, in our weak spirit. It just overcomes us, and instead of crucifying our ego, it grows and mutates our ego. So God says, "Give vengeance to me." But he's not saying don't stick up for yourself. He says don't return evil for evil, Paul goes on to say, but overcome evil with good. I like to rephrase it. Jesus talked about the leaven of the Pharisees, which is religiousness. Sin is likened to leaven and leprosy and how it's contagious. But he also talked about the leaven of the kingdom. So when Paul says, don't return evil for evil, I like to say, don't let evil infect you, but instead you infect evil. Instead of let evil turn you into evil, how about you turn evil into good? And the image that comes to my mind from a movie would be The Matrix. I believe it's the third one, where Mr. Smith is cloning himself. I see that as a prophetic type of evil being infected. And those guys didn't necessarily sin in order to be infected. He infected them, and then they sin. Because it says in Romans 5, not all sinned like Adam, but all sinned, meaning all have sinned. And we're all infected, and we need to be vaccinated, and the leaven of the kingdom is the vaccine. So when Jesus says turn the other cheek, is he asking us to be a doormat? Or as one of my my Bible school teacher said, he was in a Catholic church and this nun slapped him twice, and then he walked away because Jesus said only let him slap you twice. No. Jesus said if they slap you on the right cheek. Now what does that mean? That means a backhand. It means an insult. A punch is an assault. You then go to jail and be arrested. This is an insult. It says turn the other cheek, meaning I'm not beneath you. We're equal as human beings, and you want to hit me, it's going to cost you. Okay, what he's saying is, he says, I tell you not to resist an evil person. Well, that's a bad translation. What it means, resist evil without violence. So just turn the other cheek and say, don't give him access. Don't punch him back, which all it does is cause emotions, and then you can snap. Just turn the cheek. Don't give him access. And if he moves, you keep moving. And say, stand up for yourself. You could have been a slave, and that's your master, and he's very abusive. So you turn, and they can be abusive to an extent. Even back then, we like to think of the Roman Empire as immoral, and they're not. In fact, the Roman Empire had what they called moral police, much like the country of Iran has today, for dress code and stuff. You weren't allowed to abuse your slave like that, no. And he goes on for another example and says, if someone sues you and takes your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. Well, imagine this. You're suing a guy who has nothing but a jacket. Come on, why are you suing the guy? Should you have lent him money in the first place? Give the guy a chance. You're taking his jacket. So he says, give your cloak as well. What does that mean? Now, a tunic was a possession in the Old Testament that people used for a pledge. Here, take my tunic, I promise. It means I'll be back before tonight to fulfill my pledge. Because they used that to sleep in as a jacket, especially the poor, and they didn't have a place to live. They slept outside. That was like a blanket. Now, why give your cloak as well? Well, if you'd been sued, you have to turn that in every day, and he has to give it back to you every night. It's just hassle, huge hassle. Especially if you work far away in a field today and far away in another field tomorrow, and you got to travel to get your blanket. Nakedness. Nakedness was a big deal. When Noah's son looked upon his nakedness, it was a big deal. When David danced naked before the Lord, it was an act of worship, and some mocked him, including his wife. So Jesus says, when you go to give your tunic, give your cloak. Now, the nakedness isn't a shame upon you, but upon those who look upon you. And so you've shamed him. You're saying, shame on you. What are you doing to me? This is absurd. You're being unjust and unfair. Where's forgiveness? Where's mercy? And Jesus saying, stand up for yourself. Now, Christians like to take Corinthians 6 and say, oh, you should rather be wrong. Way out of context. Okay, a Christian who says that, prove it to me that you believe that, and sign your possessions over to me. I come knock on your door and say, yeah, give me your motorcycle, give me your car, give me your house, give me your internet, computer. Oh, there's no reason you owe me, but I'll sue you anyways. So therefore, you should just give it. Not practical, is it? Not practical. And they don't do it. In fact, Corinthians 6 is saying, it first says, what, there's not one wise in your church who can judge? He says, don't go to the world for court. It's like saying, okay, we're the kingdom of God, right? That's like saying, oh, you cheated me in America, but I'm going to sue you in Mexico. Mexico has no authority. What are you doing? We're supposed to be the leaven here. We're supposed to be infecting them for justice. And they're actually doing better than you. Come on. The next one is going the extra mile. Now, there's good applications of saying you should be a good worker, you should put in the extra effort, but that's not really what this verse is. Not that that's not a bad thing, but the verse for that would be, do it as unto the Lord. So you put in the extra effort. What this verse is saying is that, the Roman soldiers would abuse the Jews. A Roman soldier had the right to essentially commandeer you to carry his pack, much like a police officer commandeering a car in an emergency. And they were taking advantage of this law, and they were always supposed to use it when they had need. Instead of sitting down and resting, if they're in the middle of battle or something and they're tired, somebody should carry it. Well, they were making Jews do it just to harass the Jews. And so obviously someone would probably ask Jesus the question, what do we do? And here's what he says, go a second mile. What does that mean? Well, if you didn't go the first mile per request, you're in trouble. You can go to jail. But the law also said, and it's been researched and found, the law also said that if the soldier compelled you more than a mile, he would go to jail. So he's abusing you, and you're not abusing him by going a second mile, but you're standing up to him saying, wait a minute. What you did was wrong and abusive. And you threatened me with jail, but now I can equally threaten you with jail. Why don't you ask me next time, could you carry my pack? People say, oh, that's not what it says. You know what? Ask the Lord. Quit trying to figure it out with your own intellect. Ask the Lord. This is how I learned these things. I had learned the other way. I was taught by my mother the other way. And one day I had a situation, and I said, well, the verse says this. And I heard still small voice say, that's not what that means, Brian. Go look at it. And as I looked at it, he explained it to me. The next verse says, give to him who asks, and from him who wants to borrow from you, do not turn away. Again, the traditional Christian answer is give, give, give. I know a couple Christians who believe that. But when a beggar on the street asks them for money, they don't give it. And I pointed out to them, and they're like, Oh, you're just judging us, Brian. Okay, but so judging's wrong? Because you didn't you judge that I was judging you? You can't escape it, right? No, Jesus said judge with righteous judgment. He didn't say do not judge ever. Paul says remove the leaven that is among you. Look, obviously you have to make a judgment to do that. Does it work practically? This is why people aren't following the church, because they've learned from men who learn from men, and all they're learning is book knowledge, and they don't have any application because it doesn't work. Anyway, I mean, God even says in the Old Testament, I'm tired of your secondhand sermons. You guys, the average pastor, yeah, he prays, yeah, he reads, but mostly he reads 3-4 commentaries, and that's how he writes his sermon. That's rebuked in the Old Testament. I'm tired of your secondhand sermons. Jesus said you search the scriptures because in them you think you find eternal life. No, they speak of me. Paul said to Timothy, they make you wise to salvation. And Jesus says, I'm right in front of you. You've read the book, now talk to the author. Anyways, borrow and ask. Again, this is about vengeance. This isn't about somebody asking for money. This is about somebody who you wouldn't want to lend money. This is about somebody who, is your enemy. Maybe you're a bank.